So welcome to yet another episode of WorldView with Swasti, a special series that we're doing on Operation Sindoor and its aftermath. And today we are going to be discussing the role of artillery shelling. If you remember, just after we concluded the Operation Sindoor, which was a resounding success for many reasons that have been repeated again and again, you probably heard that Pakistan started shelling and Pakistan started indiscriminately killing Indian civilians. And then, of course, we responded as well. So what are the guns that Pakistan is using? What is the preparation that we should have? And to try and break down the artillery side of what is happening after Operation Sindoor, I'm very pleased to be joined once again by Brigadier Anshuman Narang.
Thank you.
I'm sure you've seen him already in one of the episodes earlier when we did long discussion on India's artillery guns and modernization. So very happy to see you here.
Thank you.
This is a very complicated time for all of us, Anshuman. And like I said, if you look at the images right after Operation Sindoor, right, it was about heavy artillery shelling. And एक चीज मैं आपसे जानना चाहती हूँ, I think also for the benefit of the viewers, which is that why this emphasis on heavy artillery, heavy artillery shelling? Because normal ceasefire में क्या होता है? What differentiates a normal ceasefire shelling, a normal ceasefire violation, that way, from a heavy artillery shelling or heavy shelling?
Okay. Heavy has two connotations.
Okay.
One is, in terms of quantum. Quantum, like you fire one round, two rounds, but you're continuously firing. It's a long barrage. It's a heavy barrage of fire.
Okay.
So that's heavy artillery. Second, purely by the military terminology, heavy means a particular caliber.
Okay.
That caliber is going 200 mm and above. We'll not get into those technicalities. Simply, they're using their normal 105, 122 mm and 155 mm, normal field and medium artillery, but they're firing more.
Okay.
Now, from a normal circumstance of a ceasefire violation where it would have been a small arms, rifle to rifle fire or something, they're using their artillery much more. And more importantly, they're using the Chinese provided SH-15 howitzers. SH-15, which is the Chinese themselves call it the PCL-181s.
Right. Yeah.
So they are using those howitzers. That is the export model. And the Pakistanis ordered about 200 to 250 plus. They somehow have already got 160 plus of SH-15s, which means comfortably they've got about 8 regiments of that. The point is it's a self-propelled gun. So to be able to reach difficult areas, it carries it and it's easier. And the ranges are better and it's finally 155 mm.
Right.
So the tonnage of fire at target end is more. But the biggest difference between us and them, we are not targeting civilians. They are targeting civilians. And that's how we lost, God bless his soul, our assistant district commissioner Rajouri.
Yes.
So they are targeting civilians, which is absolutely bad. We are not doing that.
And also, before I come to this question of, collateral damage and how should, we better prepare ourselves, because of course, Pakistanis don't seem to have any consideration for human life anyway. But before I come there, Anshuman, also help me understand, because everybody keeps talking about escalation ladder, the escalation matrix. So when it comes to shelling, how do you really understand, militarily speaking, professionally speaking, what does an escalation ladder mean?
Okay. Technically, purely from an international relations or a deterrence perspective, escalation ladder is supposed to have 43 steps.
43 steps?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll not start naming each one of them.
Yeah.
The Chinese call it 8 steps.
Okay.
And the Chinese 8 step, because the Pakistanis are now trying to follow the Chinese. The Chinese 8 step is warning strikes, missile strikes.
Okay.
Okay, what they did against Taiwan on 4th August 2022, that was a warning missile strike. Now, basically what happens is you start moving the escalation step by step and you increase the threshold. That is what they've done. And where the difference has come is they did a barbaric strike on innocent civilians on 22nd April. We responded on their terrorist camps.
Right.
So it was a response to their action.
Yeah.
Operation Sindoor. What the Pakistanis have done, they have further gone on to target the civilians and raise that escalation matrix, raise that escalation control, and try and target this our own innocent civilians again.
Right.
And the other issue is Pakistanis think they can control the escalation matrix.
Okay.
Who raises the ladder? That's a matter of control. When you're climbing up steps, one is following and the other is leading. So they think they can control the escalation matrix with the Chinese and Turkish help. That's not the case.
Yeah. So, no, that was very helpful for you to tell us that generally in the rest of the world, there are 43 steps, and perhaps for the Chinese philosophy, they have 8 steps of escalation. Now, if I may ask you like a simple question to understand the situation better, at what step of the escalation ladder are we right now? Because there is a lot of panic also and disinformation around it.
See, it's very difficult to lay down a level where we are.
Maybe a range? Yeah.
Because where the statement comes from the DGISPI today, and even from their defense minister, Pakistani defense minister, and they say, we will not de-escalate. So their statement of we will not de-escalate means you're not coming down the ladder.
Okay.
So like people are talking about off-ramp or exit strategy, coming out of that ramp of that ladder.
Yeah.
They have said that we will not de-escalate. Now, as a matured nation, a peace-loving nation, what is India doing today? India is not climbing the escalation ladder.
Right.
They stuck terrorists, they stuck our innocent civilians. We stuck back and retaliated on their terrorist camps. They started targeting civilians and military installations. We targeted back their military installations.
Right.
They went on to, drones and others hitting air bases. We have stuck back air bases.
Right.
So, slowly, gradually, it's raising. The next step, which, Colonel Qureshi and Wing Commander Vyomika Singh very aptly pointed out, is the Pakistanis are mobilizing now.
Okay.
Now, that's a different step of escalation. Moment you start mobilizing forces, that's a matter of concern. Because, again, you're hitting the borders like you had Parakram for a year plus, both the nations were mobilized.
Yeah.
So the Pakistanis have started mobilizing now.
But it's not reached that level yet, right?
It's not reached, but social media videos are very difficult to be believed. But yes, there are videos coming off, and very rightly, the Foreign Secretary and the 2 military spokespersons brought it out clearly that the Pakistanis have mobilized some places, and that's again moving one step ahead in the escalation ladder.
Right. So now, but before we come to more technical parts of, what is going to happen or what should we expect and how should we prepare for that, just help me understand, because you, of course, are an expert and, on artillery, etc. What are the common practices? When you have an adversary that seems to have no regard for human life, no regard for following these conventions or not targeting civilians, etc., how should we prepare for that collateral damage? Because we are a responsible country, right? We owe our citizens their security. Maybe Pakistan doesn't. So how, and you can also, feel free to tell me from other battle scenarios.
The simple, very, very important thing is first is survivability. So, and what our administration, government at each level is trying to do, raise the awareness when such an incident happens, when they are starting your firing, you take cover.
Okay.
You're well settled and you're well protected. That's very important because, while you may have iron domes and such defenses to stop drones, very difficult to stop artillery. You can't stop artillery round.
Right.
So, whose name is written on it, so you can ensure survivability and cooperate with the government, with the military at what actions are to be taken.
Right.
On the military front, whichever gun opens up, that needs to be silenced. So, moment the Pakistanis open up, they need to be silenced, and we need to have, and we are having adequate counter-bombardment. Counter-bombardment is which guns opens up, you counter-bombard on that gun itself, so that the gun gets silent.
Right.
So the Chinese have to be, the Pakistanis have to be responded in that manner. Sorry for using the word Chinese.
No, actually, I think the slip of a tongue means a lot because, frankly, there is a Pakistan here which is backed by China. And I really like the way you keep flipping between China and Pakistan because it is really telling. But anyway, coming back, now, since you're mentioning just now that, there is a, so you are targeting, I mean, from our side, one way to sort of ensure survivability, etc., is to also target the guns that they open. Now, I remember this brilliant worldview episode you did with me when we unpacked all the different kinds of artillery guns we have in our, for our army and what are we developing, the modernization, etc. I can urge the viewers to go and see it. It's the link is there in the description box. But I think there is still very little or perhaps zero discussion around what is the Pakistani armor all about. What kind of artillery guns do they have? How do we break that down and how do we understand that?
Okay, now for a simple understanding, the Pakistanis and Indians have evolved a similar kind of an artillery system because we got it from the Britishers.
Yeah.
So, like for our every infantry battalion,
Yeah.
that's the basic smallest module. They also have an infantry battalion. To support an infantry battalion in that kind of an era, they will have one battery which is of 6 guns.
Okay.
Now the caliber is generally the same. It will be 105 mm or 122 mm depending on it. Ranges, yes, they are shorter in ranges, will be anything from 10 to 15 kilometers broadly. So that's. Now where the difference comes is when you go on above a brigade level.
Okay.
So at a division level, you have an artillery brigade. At an infantry division has an artillery brigade and Pakistan has a similar kind of an artillery brigade.
Right.
Now within that, they are trying to get the 155 mm. Now 155 mm, surely they are short in numbers, but yes, they have a lot of self-propelled artillery. Self-propelled is which need not be towed by a tractor. It's moving on its own propulsion. So whether wheeled or tracked. And within that, yes, they've got the 155 mm. And in addition, like what you saw, the HIMARS rocket in the Russia-Ukraine war, you've heard so much of it.
Yeah.
The Chinese have an equivalent of a Grad BM-21 rocket launcher. They have the equivalent a bit higher, which Indians have the Smerch. They have the Chinese produced Smerch, which is called the A100. And then in addition, they have tried to develop their own Fateh. Now, Fateh you would have heard.
Yes.
So that's where the ranges change. And I mean, Fateh is something like our own Pinakas, but yes, they're trying to get at longer ranges.
Right. So that's by and large the long and short of what kind of different artillery guns that Pakistan have. Also, what have they deployed the most?
The maximum deployed right now is from what the Pakistanis themselves, the citizens are, tweeting and putting up the videos on social media or what you can follow the defense forums, what's coming out is maximum are the SH-15s, which I talked about.
Okay.
That's the Chinese PCL-181 export model being called the SH-15. That's their latest possession. And since that has longer ranges and they are wanting to target at longer ranges, so that's the advantage. The normal 105, they would have to deploy closer. The reach will not be so much. With that 155, the reach is more. So that's the aim.
And before I go ahead, let me just here remind everybody that it's China that is giving Pakistan about 80 to 84% of its weapons today. So China is the biggest weapon supplier to Pakistan and also to Bangladesh. So that was just the role of China. Now coming back, to the discussion, Anshuman. Also, I mean, we keep hearing that when we are discussing about artillery, etc., we cannot have this discussion complete without a discussion on drones, for example. And we have seen that the Pakistani side has fired hundreds of Turkish drones. Okay. Now, first, just help the viewers understand where do the drones come in a traditional artillery situation.
Okay. See, when the drones came in, they came initially to assist in finding a target, surveillance role.
Right.
So they assisted in the surveillance role. Gradually, they took on the role of directing artillery fire. Where the artillery fire, it drops, it's an area weapon. It can't be absolutely accurate.
Yeah.
So some kind of a correction to get it corrected is required and the drones assisted. And now the drones have taken on multitude of tasks, and you can relate all the Ds: dull, disruptive, dangerous, destruction. So all those kinds of tasks, targeting, degrading an enemy air defense, all those tasks have been taken by drones. The biggest change from Russia-Ukraine war is a shift to small tactical drones, because they are difficult to be targeted. And what happened on the Pakistani side itself, when we stuck with our loitering munitions, those are kind of drones. They refused to fire their SAMs, surface to air missiles. So when they did not fire the surface to air missiles, or they failed, whichever way, the loitering munitions struck the target.
Yeah.
So drones are very, very low cost options. You can't be firing expensive surface to air missiles against the low cost drones. And what the Pakistanis are trying to do right now is to lay a trap, and in conjunction with the eyes in the Chinese eyes, and those are actually Chinese eyes in the space, ELINT, electronic intelligence.
I'll ask you about that, yeah.
All that together, they are sending swarms and swarms of drones so that they can find wherever our electronic warfare locations are there, wherever our air defense locations are there. And the foreign secretary himself pointed that out. For the last 2 days, they have been trying to take the shield off our own civilian aircrafts, take a shield, and in that shield, get their drones inside, and maximum drones inside, and try and do a reconnaissance, find out, use decoys. Most of them did not have armed payloads. So you're confusing. If 26 locations you're moving drones from north to south, from Srinagar to Nalia, if more than 26 locations you're coming in, and you're having drones all throughout at places, you do not know which is carrying a payload which is going to strike you or not. So you're bound to activate something to put that down. And moment you activate, it's a matter of two things. You give off your location, and it's going to be a cost option. So the Pakistanis are trying to play up in that, and by themselves, they do not have that manufacturing capacity. What they're exploiting are the Turkish and the Chinese manufacturing capacities, and that's why you see so much of Turkish drones being used.
Well, yeah, and actually that brings me to another worrying aspect of our situation right now, is that while we always knew that the Turkish weapons, especially the Turkish Bayraktar drones, the TB2 drones, are battle tested in Ukraine, and before that in the Armenia-Azerbaijan war, it was the Chinese weapons that were never really tested, Even in the case of Russia-Ukraine, like we've been discussing earlier, that it's not really, the Chinese weapons are not there to be tested. But in this particular situation, this is something which is coming as a bonus to Chinese, because what do you think about that? They are testing their weapons in a live war situation against their biggest arch rival, which is us, at least in the continent.
See, as far as the major drone products which are there in the start of Russia-Ukraine war, it was primarily, Chinese DJI Mavic at the short range. But bigger versions were all Turkish and Iranians as the Russians caught on. So Chinese didn't get to test the bigger versions. Today, primarily, even whichever way, the Pakistanis initially had to get the Chinese equipment. They had to, whether it's the CH-3, CH-4, Wingling 2, and naming them their own, Sharper and Burak, and that collaborative models creating. The Chinese had to rely on a lot of Pakistani drones. But since 2021, the Turkey entry into the drones market, particularly into the combat drones market, the Akansi, the Bakhtiyars, the Pakistanis are inducting. So today, Pakistanis have their own base, which they're trying to create, and they have a Turkish and Chinese base. Yes, Chinese get a golden opportunity to test their weapons and field them and see whether, what happens is Russia-Ukraine was a plain scenario. The Chinese have to fight India in a high altitude scenario. And so for that high altitude testing, Pakistan provides them a good environment on a battle testing against a strong EW and an air defense network.
Like India, of
that's
course.
The point.
Yes, of course. And I think, like we've been repeating in several other discussions, that I mean, Pakistan is inferior in every which way. It is because of this ironclad kind of a support that they're getting, a kind of a 360-degree support they're getting from China is what actually complicates things for us. And I'm sure we are factoring that in. And now just a little thing, Anshuman, because you mentioned a little bit about the Chinese eyes. And that was a very interesting point that not many understand here. And maybe, we don't really hear that much in discussions. But you are an expert on that. Just help us understand. What do you mean when you say the Chinese eyes?
In fact, I would like to correct from Chinese eyes to Chinese brain.
Okay.
And there's a reason why.
Okay.
Eyes see.
Yeah.
From your eyes you see. So the Chinese have something called the electro-optical. There's just the normal cameras, the normal cameras which you click photographs with. So those cameras are there in good weather, they will function. They are at about 35,000 or 800 kilometers above the ground. They are there up in the space.
Right.
They will click that photographs. But there is bad weather. Nights when you are operating. So there is something called a synthetic aperture radar.
Okay.
That is also clicking photographs.
Okay.
It's, normal eye will not understand that photograph. But yes, wherever simple where you find steel or metal, it will come in white color.
Okay.
So that's another kind of a camera. And then you have the ears. And ears are the ones which are listening.
Okay.
So moment your radar emits, your radio set communication device emits, the radar, the emission of the wave is picked up by something called the SIGINT or the electronic intelligence equipment.
Okay.
So what the Chinese have tried to do now is integrate these eyes and ears together with the speaking, that is the communication satellites, into a brain system, and they call it the triology.
Okay.
In that field, apart from communication, where Starlink has left them way, way behind, and the others, in fact, if you have to believe the American ratings of CSIS gold, Olympics of the ISR satellites, the Chinese were ahead of the Americans, and the Americans themselves accepted. Okay. So they have more than 50% of ISR payloads. Essentially, what it means is anything from 10 to 15 minutes, any point on Earth, they can revisit that point.
Okay.
So any point on Earth, every 10 to 15 minutes, they can manage to click a photograph of that.
Okay.
So Chinese have advanced quite a lot in this. And if that technology, which we are quite sure, and in fact, an article today by Soumya today from ThePrint highlighted that issue of Maxer images being picked up. I find that that's very small quantity. What the Chinese civilian satellites are providing is phenomenally high. And it happened in Yangtze in December 2022.
That's right, yeah.
When the Chinese attempted Yangtze, in November 22, most of their civil satellites were clicking Sikkim, Tawang, Kaming sector area photographs, Arunachal Pradesh basically, to identify where they have to take. So similarly, in the case of Pahalgam, the Pakistanis have not only used Maxer, they've used Chinese eyes to find out what the area is and how does it look electronically, optically, in every manner. So it's a brain, Chinese brain in the sky, which has gone on to support the Pakistanis.
And this is, taking this entire discussion to a crazy new level, because, this is clearly something which is giving Pakistan a certain support that we have to factor in. So how are we trying to, this is obviously not trying to give away the planning or the strategic planning here, but in terms of scenarios, what are our counters then?
See, when the battlefield transparency is to such a great extent,
right,
and that was the case in Russia-Ukraine war as it is happening.
Yeah.
Few principles are there. If you're still, you're bound to get detected.
Yeah.
And when the escalation happens in a full-scale war, if you're still, you're bound to get detected. If you're detected, you're bound to lose a life.
Yeah.
So we have to find out ways and means of enhancing our protection.
Okay.
We have to find out ways and means of using decoys, deception. We have to find ways and means of continuously moving. And Indian Army, Indian Armed Forces are very good at it. So despite all that support, we will stand our ground and give them a lesson.
Yeah, no, that was very helpful. But if I just sort of, pick your brains a little bit and try and understand your assessment. Okay, you've been reading this theater for so long, China, Pakistan, drones, artillery. What are Pakistan's vulnerabilities?
See, Pakistan's biggest vulnerability is economy. So the more they stay in war, the more they get dried. And despite the Chinese support, the Saudi support, another IMF bailout if it happens, they can't continue to survive. Second, very interesting thing is the control of the current chief, General Munir. Disregard all the rumors, but reliable people speaking on Pak Defense Forum and highlighting their concern that after General Musharraf, they've not had a leader, a military leader of that stature. So even the military is concerned. Next is a low altitude air defense.
Okay.
Now, when I say low altitude, and the high altitude, they've got those Chinese HQ-9s and other weapons to try and help them out. And, the JF-70s and But at the lower altitude, they are high and dry with air defense. And that is why you see how effectively Indians could conduct that Operation Sindoor strikes. 9 strikes, all 9 stuck.
Yeah.
Today itself, when the conference took place, DG ISPAR said what? We have been stuck very badly. So they are accepting they've got stuck badly. So that means their low altitude air defense is weak.
Okay.
Then comes the issue of the political support.
Okay.
Everyone knows, how can it happen that a foreign secretary of the world's biggest power has to speak to a chief of army staff and not to someone else, not to a political minister. So, how can it happen that a prime minister's national security advisor has suddenly made a DG ISI?
Yeah.
So there are concerns. So that political stability, you add that part of Imran Khan, you add that part of Balochistan front. So they have got a limited scope and window. They are completely relying on their big brothers.
Yeah.
If those 2 big brothers stand by them, it's good enough. If they don't stand by them, it's a matter of concern.
Right. And just before I let you go, Anshuman, this has been absolutely brilliant as always. But where do you see this going? In the sense that, what scenarios do you think? Everybody's talking about an off-ramp. Of course, we would need some exit. India's point of conducting Operation Sindoor was to hit the terror camps. Okay. And it's always Pakistan, old habits die hard, that chose to retaliate instead of, just letting that be. But that there has been an escalation. And in your opinion, your perspective, where do you think it's going? Just give me a few scenarios for us to make a sense of what is going on.
See, Indian government from their statements is absolutely clear.
Yes.
They do not want a war.
Yeah.
And at every stage, every day, if an Indian foreign minister, a foreign secretary and the defense are giving a briefing, only one statement comes out: we do not want to escalate.
Right.
So no one wants a war. However, the Pakistani statement of we do not want to de-escalate first. Second, they're threatening, it's a kind of a threat which is coming off, is that the National Command Authority being activated and getting together, is they're trying to play the nuclear bogey.
Yeah.
So now if you play a nuclear bogey, you do not have the economy to exist for a long time. And at the lower level, you're targeting civilians. So, they're giving very, very mixed signals.
Right.
One thing is clear, that they would look for an escape route. Now, that escape route from Pakistani side can come only from a person whom they can speak to.
Yeah.
Now, yes, the US secretary has spoken to both sides.
Yeah.
Wang Yi supposedly is speaking to both sides. So maybe the Pakistanis are looking at Wang Yi as a way to off-ramp, as you rightly said, or de-escalate.
Yeah.
They have to prove to their population that they have stuck the Indians.
True.
So maybe some kind of a propaganda which they get where they are able to prove to their population that they've hit the Indians, may give them that notion of retaliation. I will not call it notion of victory, but a notion of strong retaliation.
Yeah.
If they get that, maybe they try and
Well,
de-escalate.
it's only today morning, right, that they did launch something, their own operation, Bunyan al-Marsus, which was pretty much a kind of a narrative building to show that they are still in the games and, everything. But anyway, I mean, I think on that note, I will need to, conclude the discussion. And the purpose of having these discussions is also because we felt here that there is a whole lot of misinformation and disinformation, wrong narratives, and all of that flowing around. And the purpose is to actually get to you technical knowledge from technical people. So that was extremely helpful as
Thank you.
always. This was Brigadier Anshuman Narang, an artillery specialist, and always kind enough to come and unclutter all this for us. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.